ball, the flag stays down. Healy! Oh!
He scored again! It's Davis again! It's job done now!
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Northern Ireland podcast with Adam and Andy. This week was a special week with the unveiling of this statue next to us of George Best on what would have been his 73rd birthday, and it was commemorated here at the National Football Stadium at Windsor Park.
Plenty of George's ex-teammates, family and friends were all here to see the statue being unveiled, and we're going to hear from some of them today. And so first up we're going to hear from an ex-teammate that made his debut in the same day as George, Pat Jennings.
Banks being driven left, and was it a foul? The whistle hasn't gone. Best, and a foul given. Fascinating piece of football thinking by Best.
So Pat, obviously you and George made your debuts together. How much does it now mean to be here today at the unveiling of his statue?
Well, I've always admired George. Whenever I'm asked who was the best British player I played against, I've played against a lot of players over the years, 23 years in the game. And for me, George was always the best. You know, he was my number one.
And what was he like in the changing room? You obviously played with him. What was he like to have around in that squad?
He really laid back. I think he was happiest whenever he was out on the field playing. I mean, he wasn't in any sort of fuss before. He'd be sitting there and maybe having a look at the programme. That was him. But as I say, he was happiest whether it was in training or playing. That was where he was happiest. He would even come in matches after training sessions and that, and he would say, "Pat, give me your gloves up," and he would go, let the boys have shots on him, you know.
And what was it like for yourself seeing him play so much up close? What was that to be like?
Obviously, much rather play with him than against him, but some of the great games going back to the Scotland game here at Windsor when he played Scotland on his own. Didn't score that day. I think Dave Clement scored. But so many games. I mean, the World Cup matches whenever he was at Fulham, and the press were questioning whether he was good enough to come back and play at international level. And went out against that great Dutch team, Neeskens, Rep, Van de Kerk, Cruyff, that great team in Rotterdam, and he ran riot that night. We finished up drawing 2 each with him, and he was a star player by a mile.
One of his famous moments here at Windsor Park is obviously against England, that goal against Gordon Banks. How do you look at that now? Because that's still a goal that lives on throughout the years as well.
Yeah, whenever you see it, I mean, Gordon Banks had a habit of throwing the ball away from him to kick it, you know. And George obviously seen this in his game and just ran round the back of him and flicked it away and nodded in the net. And he done the same to me a couple of weeks later at Man U. And because of what had happened the previous couple of weeks here, whenever I threw the ball up, his leg came up. So if I kick, I'm going to break his leg or break mine. And because of what had happened here, I pulled out, and meanwhile the referee's running to get up with play, and it is back to it, and he looks round and the ball's in the net, and unfortunately for me, give it that day. But I mean, it was one of those situations where you can't have anybody putting their foot up against you whenever you're going to kick it out. You're going to break his leg or break yours, you know. So it was just, but that was what George was up against, you know. Anything he could take advantage of it, yeah.
And do you think he would stand out now in the modern day, just with the way he was with the ball at his feet, kind of a visionary at his time?
Without a doubt. I mean, he done everything a yard quicker than everybody else, whether it was controlling it, taking off, passing it. He was just ahead of everybody on the pitch. And I mean, if you can imagine the pitches that they're playing on nowadays, they're like carpets. And when you look back at what he played on and what we played on, I mean, there's just no comparison.
And kind of finally, just to say, what did it mean to unveil that statue today for yourself?
It's brilliant, delighted for George to be acknowledged here in the home country, Northern Ireland, outside the National Stadium. Brilliant even for supporters coming in now to watch games. I'm sure it's going to be a big attraction. People want to be photographed alongside it. And as I say, it's brilliant for him that they've acknowledged what he's done for the game and that.
And now someone that knew George well on and off the pitch, another former teammate, Gerry Armstrong.
To Best, beautiful goal!
Gerry, George Best statue unveiled today. Just How great is it to see?
Greatest ever player for Northern Ireland, and certainly the best player I've ever played with in my life. This guy had so much talent, it was untrue. And I was so pleased to see the statue being unveiled today. I'm pleased for the family, the best family. Pleased. George would have been proud of it. And I love the fact it's an action statue. And you can see what he was all about. He was running at the ball. He was entertaining. You know, I listened, Pat told those stories when he was rooming with him for 10 years and what he used to do. And he not make people for fun. And he was just a unique talent that he was blessed. And we were blessed to have him as a player.
And how important is it, how fitting is it that he's on the ground level? It was mentioned earlier where the people couldn't come up and be on the same level as him.
That's what he loved, because he was not the sort of person, he was very unassuming, he wasn't big-headed, he was the sort of person that wanted to be just one of the guys. And he was an intelligent guy, he was a lovely person to be with, and a lot of fun. And he would love the fact that people would be able to walk up and put their arms around the statue and get a photograph taken with him, because he was part of the people. He was part of the people, and he'd love that.
So obviously genius on the pitch, but as you're saying there, off the pitch, equally great guy as well.
Great guy as well, but the pressures he had, that was the problem. He had so many pressures on him, and so demanding. The public and the press particularly put him under a lot of pressure, and he made his mistakes, but he set the path for a lot of other famous footballers in the future, because they knew the pitfalls. And George, as I say, he was a guiding light for a lot of people, and the likes of Messi and Ronaldo and co, they owe him a debt big time. But I'm just pleased that he was one of my teammates. I made my debut with him against West Germany in 1977, and he was one of my friends, and we worked together at Sky, and we coached together in America. You know, we were friends, but I miss him, and I miss his banter and his crack. He was such a lovely person to be with.
And just where does it, you've played against and with some really skillful players. Just where does George rank amongst those?
He's the best player I ever played with. He had more ability than Maradona. Had one fantastic left foot. I had an argument with Glenn Hoddle last week about it, and he said, no, Maradona was better than anybody. And I went, no, he wasn't. I said, George could dribble with both feet, scored with both feet, could take free kicks, could head a ball, could tackle, he did everything. He was a complete player. And I have no doubts Maradona was a world-class player and fantastic in his era. I just think if George was in the era that Maradona was in, or in the Messi era now, George would be up there as a shining light. He'd be up with the best. And I think, certainly for me, he was the best player I ever played against or with.
Is he a player that grabs a team and leads a team? So if he was playing in the Premier League nowadays and he was in a relegation battling team, do you think he's going to be pushing them up the table?
Well, do you know the way Messi inspires Barcelona? George would inspire you. You give him the ball and he goes past people and does things that nobody else can do. You're going, am I glad he's in my team? He was inspirational, and that's what I think he would have been for any team he played for. He would have lifted the players and brought them to another level.
Next up, we spoke to our highest ever goal scorer and George Best fan, Sir David Healy.
Best. Piece of sheer impertinence, but brilliant.
So first of all, David, how much do you think it means to have George Best here outside the National Football Stadium at Windsor Park?
I think it's huge. George was, and always should be an icon for any young footballer in Northern Ireland, especially somebody like myself, growing up, loving football, loving Man United, loving Northern Ireland. So, to have it here is the right place to have it.
And what kind of are your thoughts on George Best and his legacy here in Northern Ireland?
Absolute hero, legend. He was my dad's first hero, growing up supporting Northern Ireland. So, I met him a couple of times. I had the pleasure of spending an afternoon with George in Preston at the Football Museum. It's sort of surreal that you see somebody who's world renowned, world famous for his achievements on the football pitch, and they get the opportunity to meet him was, as I said, surreal.
And obviously for yourself, playing for Northern Ireland for many years as well, what did it mean to kind of continue that legacy, playing for Northern Ireland and having that thought all the time when you were playing?
Yeah, as young players should have the thought straight away of wanting to represent their country. So, George did it. Probably not as many times as the people of Northern Ireland would have hoped, with the ability and everything else. But nobody can take away that George's achievements on and off the pitch. Basically anybody ever talks about football in Northern Ireland, they talk about one person. And they talk about George Best, and rightly so.
So we've heard from ex-teammates, and now it's time to hear from you in
the Gower Zone. First up, we hear from the chairman of the Amalgamation of Official Northern Ireland Supporters Clubs, Gary McAllister, along with others that attended the unveiling of George Best's statue.
Look at the cheek of Best, inviting Story to come and get it.
Okay, guys, so George Best statue unveiled today. What do you make of that?
I think it's a very positive thing. Hopefully it will attract more visitors to the stadium. It's something that people want to come to photograph with on match days and match nights, and anything that can bring more people in and add to the experience of coming to Northern Ireland game, I think it has to be a good thing.
How much do you think the supporters at games and even outside of games, how much do you think they're going to enjoy this statue now?
Yeah, I think anything that adds to the experience and the occasion of coming to Northern Ireland game has to be a good thing. We have the visitor centre, which I know is very attractive, very popular, and everyone I know who's been through the visitor centre has found it to be a great experience. And word of mouth has encouraged more people to come. So hopefully this will add to the occasion too, because we want Northern Ireland games to be not just about the match, but it's about your whole day. And I know people who really make a day of it. They travel into the city early, they try and get to the stadium early now to help to build the atmosphere. And I think if this is something that can encourage people to do that and play a part in that, it has to be a good thing.
And just a word on George, how important is it that we remember him?
I think George is no doubt recognised as probably our most famous player throughout the world. When you go to anywhere in the world where George's name is mentioned, people immediately recognise the name, they know who he is, they know who he played for. And he helped to put Northern Ireland football on the map, and I think that's a very important part of our footballing history. And I think it's great to remember people like George. We've other legendary players like Healy, Pat Jennings, and it's good that people can identify those names as something positive from Northern Ireland, and again, that's through football.
Is the statue a fitting tribute for George?
Yes, I think it is. I know that it's been a labour of love for the guys involved in producing it. I actually know one of the people personally, and it's been many years of hard work in producing the statue, and also in fundraising and doing the crowdfunding. So it's nice to see that after all those years it's actually came to fruition, and today a tremendous number of people come along, lovely morning, great weather, and I don't think it could have went any better for them, so I think it was all very positive.
So first of all, how much does it mean to have a statue of George Best here in Belfast?
I think it's absolutely fantastic. We're Manchester United fans, and obviously Northern Ireland fans too. And for years we've been able to go to Old Trafford and see the Trinity statue of George, along with Dennis and Bobby. And it's fantastic having it here at the National Stadium now, that he's recognised. So, we've had the George Best Airport and all the rest, but this is the home of football in Northern Ireland, and this is where it needs to be. So.
And what did George Best mean to yourself?
Unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember George playing football. He was a cross-community icon. There's no doubt, we were just remarking there, he was a flawed genius, but it's so nice that the statue's not on a plinth. He was a man of the people. You can walk up there, you can put your arm around it, you get your photograph taken. In the dark days in All Ireland, there was a ray of hope, and that hope was sport. Sport was cross-community, and George epitomised that. Funny, we quite often go over to Old Trafford with our supporters club, Muckamore Reds, and you look in there. I remember showing my son, there's a small, in the museum, a small sort of window on George, the boots he played and the ball he played with, the football. You heard Pat Jennings remark about, Naiskin's one of the world's greatest defenders, trying to break him in half, and George danced around him. We can remember seeing that genius play football. What would it be like today? The modern pitches, modern rules, modern football equipment. Messi would have nothing on him.
Okay, so finally, George Best statue up here near the National Stadium. Would you say it's long overdue?
Yeah, I do. It's good to see it here at last, but I think it should have happened a long time ago. But with that being said, it is good that this day has finally came and we can remember George in this way. And quite fitting, a statue. He has the statue outside Old Trafford, and it's about time. Yeah, he's got one at Windsor Park, so fantastic.
Is there a moment for you that stands out about George?
Very much so. I share this story quite a lot with people, especially on the tours here at the IFA. Personally, to me, the first ever football match I attended was to see George Best play. It was in December 1989 in a charity game between Dundalk of the League of Ireland and Crewe United, and it was up at the new Grosvenor Park. And I was a 6-year-old at the time, and I just remember at the end of the game my dad holding me up with a Man United scarf draped around me, and I just seen George in front of me with the black bushy beard that he had then, and he signed the programme for me. So I always take great pleasure in saying to people that the first football game I ever went to was to see the great George Best play, and I cherish that moment near 30 years on. So yeah, genius, absolutely genius, George.
Fantastic. And what does it mean now that this statue is going to be here for generations to come, and how important is it that history is going to live on with George here?
Yeah, very important. It is, it's paramount that we remember our history and recognise it and, showcase it, especially with the likes of George Best. I mean, Northern Ireland, we're such a small country, but for us to say that we've produced arguably the greatest footballer that's ever lived is quite surreal to even say that. So yeah, I think it's vitally important that we do showcase that at the stadium here now that we have the newly redeveloped Windsor Park and the National Stadium. Then yeah, why not showcase it, showcase our history from all the way back to George Best and remember what he was for a fantastic footballer.
Best just with styles between him and the goal, and he's got a clear chance, and that's funny. England with no cover at all, but what a goal by Best. He drilled it in.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Northern Ireland podcast. The next time you'll hear from us will be when we play Estonia and Belarus away, when we'll be on the hunt for another 6 points. Join us then for all the behind the scenes action, so make sure you're subscribed.
Armstrong! Northern Ireland has scored through Gerry Armstrong. It's a good ball. The flag stays down. Healy! Oh!
They've scored again! It's Davis again! It's job done now.